Esports is an extremely subjective term. For some, it's a competitive industry where they showcase their skills in pursuit of grand prizes. For others, it's merely a social setting where they connect with players around them. But for a lesser known, smaller, and infinitely more deceptive few, it is a mechanism to garner money, power, and fame at the direct expense of those around them. Over the course of my career in content creation, I've discussed the esports industry a number of times. There was the saga of Regal Reserve, now rebranded as Spades GG, and its deceptive manipulation of potential members to grow a social presence. There was property they did not own, advertised as a team residence. There were hacked social media accounts, allegations of sexual conduct impropriety, and a host of other factors which made the organization in its existing form a blight on the industry. After that, and the series of revelations attached to such an investigation, I found myself in a situation where community members began to come to me with similar circumstances. Next on the table was Team Valier. Valier was rather different than Regal Reserve, but with a few key similarities. For starters, they were operating at the expense of those around them, with manipulative and falsified social media ads to trick players into utilizing their support a creator code with Epic Games. But more importantly, the investigation into Valier and the response when that video was finally made public opened my eyes to a bigger picture that I've decided to discuss today. So what is my goal for this video? Well, honestly, I have switched back and forth a few times on what I believe will and what I hope will happen. In the beginning, it was a hit piece. It honestly was. I believe that the Fortnite Esports community is infested with predatory tactics, immature children, and deceptive leadership. But over time, I began to understand more about why these things are true and how the wider community beneath these organizations would benefit if even a few of the existing social norms were changed. Ultimately, I landed on a goal of highlighting exactly where there are systems in place which must be torn down for the wider credibility of the entire space, and in pursuit of that goal, it will become necessary to address a few specific teams. But rather than attacking the mere existence of those teams, I will seek to motivate them and others to alter their business, or lack thereof, practices in order to benefit the broader player community. I would also like to make one final statement addressing the clearly vindictive approach that many of these groups have and will continue to take. This does not seem to manifest itself as a direct attack on me personally. It seems to appear as retaliation against each other for perceived slights. I will assert with absolute clarity that the teams who attack most viciously, especially in the aftermath of this video, are the teams that compose the largest problem in the space. Self-reflection and beneficial changes can be hard. Screaming at everyone around you because you are too weak to change is easy, and certain teams, certain leadership, and certain community members will be faced with a choice, to which their response will be extremely telling. Over the course of this investigation, I conversed with dozens of separate sources. Some highlighted flaws within their own teams, others who were high-ranking leadership, past and present, for a variety of different organizations, members of the community who have been striving to join some of these groups, and everything in between. I could blow a crater in the social fabric of this community 6 miles wide, and in its current form, it honestly might never recover from that. But it's become clear that I must carefully pick and choose which topics to address, or I risk turning this into something that simply does more harm than good, by offering up a massive platform for individual grievances to be aired. And on top of that, a full video would be about 6.5 hours long or something like that. It's just not feasible. With all that said, let's truly begin. We start once again with Valier, but not Valier itself, rather the tactics that they used. Valier was growing their social media presence by leveraging false promises on TikTok and also reaping financial rewards from these methods. However, in the aftermath of that video, it became clear that they were not the only ones. A user by the name Osiris on Twitter began rapidly firing off examples of other teams who were doing, or had done, the exact same thing. This was an example of the vindictive behavior I discussed earlier. If we go down, you go down. If we suffer, you suffer. But more important than which individual teams he would showcase was how these teams all adopted the same social media tactics. From a number of sources in the following days, I learned of a particular user named JXG100K, or Jag as some call him, and it turns out Jag had been teaching other community members this very same method, which went a little something like this. First, you simply go to the YouTuber Ghost Ninja, who produces skin concepts and various Fortnite material, or you find a pro player skin mockup, of which there are many, such as the skin of Tfue, which does not actually exist in the game, and you harvest the graphic for yourself. See here an example such as this purple banana, which is quite literally one of the images used by Valier in their own videos. Once you have this fake skin, you find a picture of a mansion and then claim to pay your members, buy them tons of items, and sprinkle in some glitched developer code, or I hacked Ninja's account, or these epic devs gave me every item in the game, etc., and post it to TikTok with the crucial stipulation that anyone who wanted all of these fake things go plug in your creator code, and voila, you have an army of children being manipulated into feeding your bank account. This is a tactic that seemingly originated with JXG, and rather than keep it to himself, he would teach others. That's just the beginning though. Simply teaching your friends how to lie and steal is one thing, but JXG jumped from team to team like disease-infested fleas jumping from ship rats during the 1300s plague. He started on Team Uprising, went to Team Hue, then Devour. He switched over to Alpha Alliance, then Limit. Then it is alleged he attempted to create his own team, which failed, so he went back to Team Limit, but doubled up and joined Ares at the same time. After being called out for this, he stepped back to just Team Limit again, and eventually, after the implosion of Valier, and with the understanding that his method had been found out, and his image most likely compromised, he deleted his Twitter. Or did he? Turns out JXG is back and might be attempting to join Team Assault, but more importantly, understanding that JXG was the one who taught Valier management how to produce these TikTok scams, we must also take a look at Loy, the previous owner of Valier, who directly financially benefited from them. Loy cut and ran when Valier came down. It all happened very quickly and he was gone. But now, a previous account he allegedly owned has been approaching ex-Valier staff and attempting to reform the group under a different name. FaZe Guffo seems to actually be Loy, having repurchased his old account or otherwise reacquired it, and all of this should speak to the subterfuge of these community members who will bounce between accounts and identities like an absolute ping pong ball. This is important because it begins to establish the point that within this community there is an insane amount of member turnover. This week, a member will be on one team, the next he's been on two others, and is about to switch to a third. The fluctuation here is incredible, and with that in mind, it starts to become understandable how a prolific TikTok scamming method infiltrated practically every team in the entire community. All of this is to establish how growth tactics can become normalized. A statement by the previous Team Limit TikTok manager reads as follows. 6 months ago, I joined Limit as a TikTok manager. I was told to grow the TikTok, so I took the knowledge of some teams around me doing the same thing. This is a perfect example of the mentality. Others do it, so I will do it too, which in turn leads to more teams using the method. And eventually, something that should not be normal, ever, has become a commonly accepted and utilized growth method in the community. To be fair, some teams acted swifter and more decisively than others. Team Limit apparently removed him rapidly upon discovering what he was doing and took down all of the content, which is a decent response and what anyone should expect. But the point is to highlight that as members and management filter through a lot of these teams, what is normal and acceptable can rapidly change for the worse, leading to a justification of, well, everyone does it, so we should too. Knowing that unacceptable, even illegal things can become normalized in this community, it's time to define the term internal operations. Over the course of my conversations, it became clear what internal operations typically meant, but an example of a succinct definition came from the owner of a newly formed team named Veil. It reads, in mainstream, internal operations is investment. Teams like Aggro, Delirium, and other teams recruit them to pay monthly into the team to help thumbnails and editors. This is just one example. There are numerous instances where the words internal operations and investment become synonymous, but when we understand that there is cash flow into these businesses, a number of questions become paramount. Where does the money go? What is the equity structure? Are these teams official businesses? Who are the investors? And what do they get in return? The obvious place to start when analyzing what internal operations is and why in its current form it is a legitimate problem is Team Aggro. Aggro is a name that popped up frequently during this investigation for a number of different reasons, but confining it to the topic at hand, we can see this paragraph that was sent by Aggro to speculative members as an official description of role responsibilities. We bring on investors as part of our internal operations team. They contribute to the team by helping fund the team and being a role model for the members. Perks include joining the team and gaining exposure / the opportunity to grow yourself / brand. Access to networking with our members, access to the team chat and management chat, has a say in decisions that deal with funds such as merch and etc. Job duties: fund at least $200 a month. Find beneficial sponsorships for the team or players. Find business opportunities/partnerships that the team can benefit from. Find and recruit other investors to partake in the team. Be a role model to members as you are part of the management team. We take pride in our internal operations team, and we only bring on blah blah blah. This description quite clearly shows that the model is to pay the team every month in order to have a say in decisions and get access to the members. And this role has been verifiably filled by children who are underage. Let's reduce the role of internal operations down to its most rudimentary form here. For Team Aggro, this has been given to and filled by literal children, 12, 13, 14, etc. This is the recruitment of a child to pay an organization $200 a month for intangible rewards, and one of their primary role responsibilities is to go find other children to pay the organization as well. This is a widespread funding tactic with numerous examples of players being seduced into this bizarre reverse employment model, a model they push heavily all across social media. I was unable to verify at this time whether or not Aggro is an officially licensed business, but I find it incredibly hard to believe that they are, given the revelations I will soon discuss regarding other teams. If they are not an official business and do not have the viciously complex structures set up to afford equity to a large number of underage children, while also allowing them to have a say in decisions that deal with funds, such as merch, etc., then the team is operating in a dangerous way that could have intensely negative ramifications for its actual members. It has been alleged by multiple of my sources that Aggro previously received over $40,000 annually just from the internal operations program, largely composed of underage children, who desperately wish to live out their esports dream and have been manipulated into believing that paying hundreds, even thousands of dollars to Aggro is the right way to do it. Many sources, fearing for their future in the entire space, asked to remain anonymous because the vindictive pursuit of ruining anyone who crosses them has become a staple for certain teams. Another interesting thread, which we'll transition towards the next team to discuss, is that Aggro has a tremendous amount of member turnover with a team named Delirium. It goes so far as the current owner of Team Delirium himself being in Aggro not even 1 week prior. The membership turnover between these two teams is ridiculous, which leads us to Delirium itself. This is a post obtained from within the Delirium management structure and given to me by a number of different sources. The relevant paragraph reads as follows. In the UK, it's registered as a limited company, LTD, which we can do, but it's a long process. And if we want to have shares for owners, I'll need your guys' address and personal info to allocate them when registering. I'm still uncertain if the LTD is the right move now, as the second it happens, you have to tax every income and allocate additional expenses for accountants/bookkeepers, etc. Especially for an online gaming team, I think we can get away with not needing it for now until we start making a lot of money, but can discuss with you guys further. This is a big problem. Having established what the internal operations role typically is, we can see that Team Delirium heavily utilizes the role. This is a high-profile Fortnite community team deliberately avoiding a legitimate structure while participating in a normalized funding model, largely driven by underage children, left vulnerable as a result of their enthusiasm to gain notoriety in the space that has no actual structure and no legitimacy whatsoever. They specifically avoid paying taxes while earning an unknown amount of money from problematic sources. Where that money goes remains unclear, but when the definition of internal operations is outwardly and inwardly known as investment, while there literally cannot be an existing equity structure, how can the industry be perceived as anything other than, at best, a joke? A social circle of clout-chasing teens driven by social media dopamine hits and tax-free income, or, at worst, a scam, a reverse employment scheme to extract money from children while dodging legal regulation and accountability. Delirium also has connections to an operation called Saru General, which is owned by a Delirium co-owner. Listed on their social media, it projects that Delirium is powered by Saru General, which suggests some form of partnership/cash overlap. Saru General being quite clearly profitable based on the relative size of influencers that they routinely partner with, but when one organization is powered by another, with joint ownership, and that organization is deliberately dodging taxation and legality, it creates an ever-expanding spiderweb of problems. During the course of this investigation, I had many separate Discord calls, some with owners and management of teams or players on their roster, all the way down to speculative members. Of these calls, there was mixed reception. For some, it was a concise process where they provided and refuted claims they already knew to be floating about in the ether or online. For others, it was a frantic mess where the defense evolved into, quite literally, well, everyone does it, so why is it wrong? One of the calls I had was with Team Assault, and I would say that this particular call was the most chaotic in terms of explanations and defenses. There were repeated denials that the team received any sort of funding other than a newly acquired G Fuel link, which had not yet awarded any commissions. But it turns out Assault is perhaps a leader in the internal operations ring, with repeated and decisive recruitment for this program being done by their management. It can be confirmed with certainty that members in the age range of 12, 13, and 14 were recruited into the internal operations payment model. The leadership, primarily the owner, Kefua, would habitually promote the internal operations program to enlist more paying members into the cycle. But to cap it all off, they openly acknowledged on my recorded call that they do not have any legitimate business structure whatsoever. No contracts are handed out ever. There is no equity structure at all. Once again, this is a team that pulls underage children into a hype-driven payment scheme where they enrich the leadership with investments, but those investments do not get funneled back into the operations and do not have a legitimate accountability return. I say enrich here because on our call, Assault's management team adamantly denied having ever paid, more than $100 for a job and insisted that they, once in a while, will pay $5 for a banner, a logo, or a thumbnail. If that is true, then the vast majority of all funds flowing into the group do not flow back out. They accumulate in an unknown bank or PayPal account, enriching a few high-ranking members with tremendous turnover, while the children and minors, enthralled with the image of being in a reputable esports organization or on a respected team, pay hundreds, even thousands of dollars for nothing. In the aftermath of my call with Assault, the leader, Kefua, announced a break, removed Assault from his social media tags, and stepped away from social media and refused to answer my further questions specifically about the internal operations program. The official Assault Twitter page simply posted "change," to which many members replied they had no knowledge of what was happening, and it appears the team has reacted to the knowledge that their existing operational model, or lack thereof, which consists of idealistic and hopeful children being sucked into a useless payment scheme, might be about to end. The connections here are endless. Assault STFN, a user who replied in a brash and impulsive fashion to my original intro on the subject, appears to have had a change of heart. His previous role saw open recruitment for internal operations on Team Apex, and if you scroll this thread, you can see instances of young teens enthusiastically trying to pay this team for nothing, because the funding method has been constructed deliberately to trick speculative members into dumping money on a monthly basis into an organization that simply does not exist in any definable legal way, yet operates and acts as if they are a legitimate structure. Speaking of Apex, I've seen what I believe to be credible allegations that the team deliberately exploited an enthusiastic grinder for thousands of dollars, convinced him to pay for the management to fly out and meet each other, all for the opportunity to be a part of the organization. But upon milking him dry, they kicked him, and have since begun threatening anyone who discusses the topic with legal action. For the protection of sources who fear for their position in the entire industry, I will keep them anonymous, but as is always the case, more info will always emerge when scrutiny rises. Team Assault is also moving a mile a minute. There is a speculated merger, I believe, as of the making of this video, with a partnership in the pipeline, apparently, for Rare One's GG. However, rumors emerged that Rare One's GG was legitimately threatening legal action against Assault as a result of internal mismanagement. And the question must be asked, is this a response to looming exposure of their funding mechanism and failure to adhere to any legal business practice whatsoever? Either way, the community is a hectic and consistently evolving landscape of manipulation and faulty business practices. Either way, it seems a rebrand is about to occur, or a merger, perhaps with Team Livid, with the intention to shift their image away from what they speculate might become tainted branding as a result of their financial and structural failures. This extends across the entire community with little exception. Another example would be Team Luxury, or Team Outcast. Outcast being another team with secondary allegations such as funding being garnered from a member's OnlyFans account, but in that category there is little proof to supplement the rumors and it must be treated as raw speculation. Despite previously having an open dialogue with the Outcast owner, upon asking certain questions he retreated and would not answer me, which I can only speculate may be a result of the original conference call I had with Team Assault and the ensuing turmoil afterwards. This is not the only issue. With a lack of legitimate structure, even innocuous situations can become problematic. Team Limit is a perfect example of this. Limit, some time ago, worked with a designer to produce a website. There was no official agreement, but both parties were unhappy with the final product. The result of this disagreement was allegations of scammed payment by HeroGaming.gg, with an estimation of the value lost by a terminated partnership. A simple disagreement without contracts, without structure, and without business legitimacy becomes a he said, she said with allegations of scamming on top. This problem extends further, with no business structure at all, yet advertised giveaways that total over $1,000 in one instance. Even if perpetrated by a rogue member, as Limit claimed to me, it still opens them up to long-lasting issues. If there was some sort of documentation to point to, and this is true of so many teams and so many instances, not just Team Limit, the issues would have been avoided. A disagreement arises, the structure can be relied upon, and everyone falls back on what can be proven. But when teams are amassing, in many instances, well over 100 different members and funneling cash through different designers, editors, and services with no way to actually trace or verify any of it, problems will arise for everyone. The issues with this communal structure run deep. Switching gears, we can see that a highly requested service is PC optimization, and many community members are willing to provide that skill set for free. However, even this rudimentary concept becomes a problem when subjected to the greed and impulsivity of a lucrative industry owned and operated by teenagers with zero accountability and oversight. Flame 4K Beast, a player notably providing these optimizations, was vouched for and promoted by several high-profile esports figures, but after amassing over 50 different applicants, he would ignore and brush aside those that had paid him, only to offer faster services for $100 via Cash App, having told others to send friends and family money on PayPal, for which refunds are much harder to obtain, and manipulate enthusiastic children into paying for an advantage in Fortnite and run away with the cash. All this being facilitated by high-profile esports community members, even leaders. Team Vanish, called out by a player for failing to pay necessary compensation for upwards of 20 days past due, which can have an enormously negative impact on someone's ability to sustain their livelihood. And these flaws become increasingly more severe the larger a group grows and the more responsibilities it undertakes while lacking a legitimate framework. And in place of a real foundation, it relies on the peer-to-peer structure of flippant, impulsive teens, obsessed with the feeling of money and social power. There is an avalanche of further issues, an untapped reservoir of scams, manipulations, and abuses that span numerous teams. But with the goal of outlining what I believe to be the largest issues, I will table all that for perhaps another time. The coming days in the aftermath of this video will be extremely telling. I anticipate and hope for a strong push away from the model of children funding your teams with no actual structure, and a heavy emphasis on legitimizing. Form an LLC, an LTD, or some sort of registered business, and do not rely on the hype-driven naivete of children who just want recognition to milk them dry for their lunch money. Sadly, I believe there will be a vindictive response. Certain groups, certain people, and certain leadership will attack or defame their competition, aspiring to shift the narrative in a different direction. In the aftermath of the simple video intro I posted to Twitter, there seems to have been a mass reporting campaign against the team's Twitter account simply because they were not shown. There was no rhyme or reason, just a vindictive desire to hurt others, because they were seeking retribution for something that had not even happened yet. To me, that only serves to amplify their guilt. Those that hunt down their community peers to ruin them, to shame them or attack them, and injure their reputation or future, those are the individuals that the community should look to as the problem, because they are. There are reasonable fixes to be made here, and those that do so will thrive, but if the atmosphere deteriorates further, everyone will suffer as legitimate sponsorships, partnerships, and investments see the space for what it really is. If this particular corner of the industry can overcome the manipulative, vindictive, and predatory structure it is so obviously based on, everyone will benefit, but it remains to be seen whether or not that will happen. That's it for today. For anyone who wants to support, there are links down below: merch, Patreon, Twitter, other social media, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.